Hey guys, it's me again, and you're probably wondering if Sisters of Parvos is worth coming back to. And to that I have to say, yeah. But in all seriousness, Sisters of Parvos is more weapons than update, and despite all the work I put into making this video, the length of the video probably won't reflect that at all. It also didn't help that I had a bit of a deadline. Also, for the next few months, you're probably going to hear my portable air conditioner in the background. I'm really sorry, but I'm also trying my best not to die of heat stroke since this house doesn't have central air or good insulation. Anyways, let's start with the important stuff. The mods. This update adds galvanized mods, which is DE's best attempt at bringing up guns and power. Each of them are ranked 10 mods that you get from the arbitration shop and cost 30,000 endo and 1.4 million credits to max out each, which sounds like a lot, but most of the mods are bad. The absolute must-have mods are the multi-shot mods. These are just better than the originals and give you enough multi-shot at max stacks that in a lot of cases you can leave out vigilante armaments or lethal torrent, giving you more mod diversity. The other mods are situational at best. Let's start with the condition overload wannabe mods. And contrary to popular belief, yes, they do work. They're just bad. The benefit of these mods is so small that it's hard to notice unless you do a side-by-side comparison. The difference is even less noticeable when you have the aforementioned multi-shot mod. And that's before we mention that you need a kill or two to activate the effect, unlike melee. Even then, it's not better than hammer shot on all weapons, like the Fullman. Despite galvanized amplitude doing more damage, the hammer shot build kills faster. I've tried over and over again to get a faster time with galvanized amplitude, but I just couldn't. And for some unknown reason, it's less effective on projectile weapons, which means most of the weapons from this update, as well as most of the AoE weapons, like the Kuva Zarr for example. And when you add galvanized chamber to the mix, there's virtually no difference between it and hammer shot. The weapons that win big from these mods are beam weapons, since they have damage ramp up and procs a lot of status, so the effect is much more noticeable on them. So the TLDR on these mods is that this mod works on a case-by-case basis, so you need to test it with every weapon individually. But if you mostly use AoE weapons, then it's a skip, unless we're talking about the Cedo. Then this mod literally makes the Cedo the best shotgun in the game. But hey, at least you don't lose all your stacks at once like the galvanized crit mods. The galvanized crit mods are by far the worst of the bunch. Not only are they the most demanding to proc, but status procs don't count towards kills with this mod. And of course, the stacks have individual timers. But that's not all. If the timer runs out, you lose all of your stacks. So it's just not worth it to run under any circumstances. So you save some endo and credits by skipping these altogether. Unlike the galvanized mods that are very hit or miss, the Arcanes are not. All of them are pretty good, and the farm for them is pretty easy since they're guaranteed drops from acolytes. However, the fact is that you probably already have something similar. The Arcanes I'm referring to are Primary Charger and Blade Charger, which at max rank give you the same damage bonus as a rank 4 version of the new Steel Path Arcanes. Only these go on your Warframe instead of your weapon, and are chance-based to proc, but they can be procced with Warframe powers like Wukong's clone. If you aren't sure whether these are worth your time and happen to have these Arcanes already maxed out, then try these first or wait for the market to calm down before buying them. Now let's talk about the main focus of the update, Sisters of Parvos. Very similar mechanics to Kuva Liches, only they are much faster than their Grineer counterparts. The only way to get a Corpus Lich is you need to do a successful run of the Grand Void, and you don't need to do more than rank 1, and after that a candidate should spawn right after you complete the mission objective. Kill it and that's it. The reason they are faster is due to the way you get murmurs. Instead of killing a weak thrall, you have to kill a hound.
What the dog doing?
And they give a lot more murmurs than thralls, with DE's justification being that they're tankier and have actually dangerous abilities, like putting your next ability on cooldown from 300 meters away. Except they aren't actually tankier or more dangerous, since you can take away their shields and armor with psychic bolts, and you can disable their abilities with silence. So after all that, they're just a Kubro of barely 7,000 health and a very low damage melee.
What the dog doing?
In addition to dropping their weapon, they also drop their hound as well as hound parts to build your own, though you won't need to as your foundry will be flooded with completed dogs. The Grineer Liches on the other hand have not been improved in terms of speed. Average, the Corpus Liches should take you around 45 minutes to an hour, while the Grineer ones still take 2 to 3 depending on how aggressive they are. Luckily we have new things to speed up Liches considerably, like the new Ul mod, which is the wild card that will always be correct against your Lich. This card is extremely useful for finding out the correct order of Requiem mods, and will shave off hours of time, shortening the grind down to as little as 20 minutes for the Corpus Liches and an hour for Kuva Liches if you get lucky. And if you use them right, they effectively last forever. They also have a decent chance to drop from Kuva Liches when they flee to their ship, along with the ultimatum item, that is essentially a spawn beacon for your current Lich. Very handy for Kuva Liches that like to hide. So while the experience is much faster, Liches still take too long to spawn in, and Thralls / Hounds don't spawn nearly as often as they should. Side note, you should avoid any crossover missions. Basically what will happen is you'll get the opposite kind of Thrall you'll need and they won't give you murmurs when killed. However, your Lich will still spawn regardless. Let's talk about the quest. The Waverdier quest starts off with one of the vent kids getting hurt, and when you go to visit the vent kids, it turns out she was trying to follow a magic comic book that gets more pages when you complete certain tricks.
What the hell?
If you haven't touched the K-Drive since they were released, you're gonna have a bad time. K-Drives feel very different to how they first launched, and it also doesn't help that K-Drives are bugged right now, making them very easy to fall off. How did I fall there? What did I hit? That's why I hate K-Drives. I really don't think you'll be able to complete the last 2 pages unless you have the score multiplier mod that you get from rank 3 event kids. But overall, the quest is unfun, tedious, and adds nothing interesting to Warframe's story. At least none of Yareli's parts are locked behind K-Drive rank, but Yareli's weapon is, so good luck with that. But if that wasn't bad enough, Yareli herself isn't even worth the trouble. Now, I know I have strong opinions about Warframes, but Yareli is the worst frame in the game by far. Wow, who'd have thought? The K-Drive frame is bad. Shocker. Most of her powers are useless. Her 1 is her only usable ability, which fires binds that CC enemies, similar to Vauban's Bastille and a cone in front of you. Now, the enemies need to walk into it to work, but the workaround for this is to just use it point blank. Her 2 is the K-Drive, which gives you a 75% damage reduction that can't go any higher than that. It also has health for some reason. At least she gets ragdoll immunity and stagger resistance when she's on it, because I really thought she'd have a lot of problems taking damage and instantly killing herself when she was knocked off her board. But while she's on her board, XP sharing is disabled for her. So if you plan on leveling a secondary weapon while using her, don't do that. That's a lot of XP. However, my fucking weapon is not getting any XP. It's barely getting any. Wait a minute. Am I immune to XP sharing while I'm on this thing? I am! What? I'm immune to XP sharing when I'm gonna lose my shit. Her 3 is a slash aura similar to Equinox's main. The only problem is its range is far too low to justify the range not being moddable. And her 4 is a grouping tool that doesn't give you any time to capitalize on the grouping before ragdolling everyone inside away, defeating the entire point of using it. So she has bad CC, low damage, okay survivability, all with the justification is, haha, I go very fast with good control over my speed and direction. Skip Yareli and her annoying quests, and don't even bother buying her just to subsume her, since she gives you aqua blades, which is useless. Ah yes, the melee changes. The whole reason we're even at this point is because DE nerfed the guns we loved just for being popular. And now we've come full circle. Berserker was nerfed strictly because it hurt the art team's feelings that their animation wasn't being played out in full. So you can't stack Prime Fury with Berserker anymore, but you can stack it with Quickening and Gladiator Vice. Berserker also only works on kill now, and the timer has been reduced from 24 seconds to 10 seconds. Honestly, this change is dumb. It's like the art team isn't even considering the fact that this is a fast-paced ninja game where you live and die by how fast you can kill things. So it stands to reason that I'd like to kill things faster. There's literally a whole game mode around this. If an animation is too long, you shorten it. What doesn't need to be changed is the fact that the Necromech sprint animation is perfectly synced with Can You Feel My Heart by Bring Me the Horizon. Condition Overload was nerfed again. It hasn't really changed much in overall power. The real kicker here is the Blood Rush nerf, which actually makes non-combo builds competitive. So just replacing Blood Rush with Sacrificial Steel actually does similar damage. Now yes, Blood Rush is still better and cheaper, and Umbra Former doesn't exactly rain from the sky either, but it's definitely something to consider. And heavy attacks have gone relatively unchanged, unless you're that kind of person that uses heavy attacks at 12 times combo. Then Sacrificial Steel is now the best crit chance mod for those builds. Englaves also got a change in their throw speed. This is supposed to be a quality of life change, but perfect throws are still impossible to do. In fact, I only managed to do one after falling off of something, so they still need to be fixed. Also, if you want to get the old charge speed back, all you have to do is change Organ Shatter for Amalgam Organ Shatter in your build, and that's it. Honestly, I thought Glaives would get nerfed a lot harder, since they do millions of damage for no real reason. They can abuse stealth multipliers, and the explosion can benefit from headshot multipliers. In fact, fact, it's the only explosion in the game to do so. On top of that, it's the easiest weapon for Banshee to spread sonar with, so it could do extremely high damage from range in a massive AoE and be abused by the Warframe that does the highest single target damage in the game. And that's before we even factor in the Glaive Prime's guaranteed slash proc. If they did nerf this thing into the ground, you literally could not be mad about it. Also, the damage nerf only affects like bounce builds, which no one really used anyways and were already worse damage wise, especially since glaives don't have tracking when they bounce. It's literally just random. And now the reason this video took me so long. The Tenet primaries and secondaries weren't that bad to get, but the Tenet melee weapon took me over 50 hours. But let's start with the fan favorite, shall we? The Tenet Arca Plasmor is unfortunately not too great, and really needs the new Arcanes to survive at higher levels. The slash procs you get from 100 munitions are also pretty low, but luckily DE added a gimmick that was a bug turn feature, where the projectiles bounce, and it's the best way to squeeze extra damage out of this thing, since it doesn't have a headshot multiplier. But overall, I think the Catch Moon is still better. The Tenet Tetra is a weapon that a lot of my viewers hyped up, saying it beats the Brahma in terms of damage, and frankly, I'm not impressed. It doesn't have the upfront damage to come close without slash procs from 100 munitions. Despite having no fall off on the explosion, originally it did have consistency issues due to the explosion sometimes not properly detecting direct hits, and it also dumps the entire mag when you use the alt fire, and then it got nerfed. But despite me not really liking the alt fire, I'm very impressed with the primary fire. It's a slow firing, very hard hitting assault rifle, and I like this a lot more overall. The Tenet Envoy is a weapon I was very skeptical about when it was first shown off on DevStream, and since DE hates AoE, but surprisingly it's not garbage. It's a hybrid rocket launcher that's wire guided, so wherever you look, the rocket will go. However, I'd put a recoil mod in the X-List slot, that way the initial recoil doesn't throw off your headshots. Its projectile is a bit slow and doesn't quite match the Brahma in terms of damage, but it's a lot more practical than the Brahma, having a lot more ammo and auto reload when holstered. Overall, it's not too bad, but it's not my favorite. The Kuva Zarr, on the other hand, does beat the Brahma in terms of everything. Damage, ammo, it's more practical, and the shotgun mode can actually be used at a decent range. This is such a big upgrade over the regular Zarr, even though on paper it doesn't seem like it would be. Honestly, I hated the original Zarr. It had low damage and the cluster bombs bouncing at a large distance away from the initial target, and the Kuva Zarr has none of those issues. It's by far the best weapon this update. The Tenet Flux rifle is a surprise for sure, but a welcome one because it shreds. It's no longer a beam weapon, it's a hit scan SMG that's very accurate and very powerful, mainly due to it being hybrid focused instead of status focused, and despite not being a beam weapon anymore, the augment for it still works, giving it over 200% status chance, making it much better than 100 munitions, so don't sleep on this weapon. The Tenet Cycron is the Corpus Kuva Nucor, and honestly it's much better at dealing damage and way more consistent due to it having higher crit chance, and it technically changed to one more person than the Kuva Nucor because it has innate punch through, and it also has infinite ammo via a battery. I was gonna say this is better than the Kuva Nucor at applying status, just for that, but then I remember that the Kuva Nucor applies an invisible status called Microwave, and so no matter how many elements you stick on your Tenet Cycron, the Kuva Nucor will always have it beat by one. The Tenet Detron, while yes it's an upgrade, it doesn't feel like one. This one is more crit focused, having the lowest status out of all the Detrons, and it just feels wrong. It also has the same alt fire as the Pandero and the Kuva Kraken. Strange. The Tenet Spirex is a power crept version of the Lex Prime / Kuva Seer, and frankly I'm all for it. It is projectile instead of hit scan, but the projectile has AoE that goes through walls, making it very forgiving. It also has guaranteed impact, so it can take advantage of hemorrhage. Pretty solid overall. The Tenet Diplos is awful. It's extremely painful to use due to its lock-on mechanic that's similar to the Sepulchrum. The main problem is it only shoots one low damage bullet per target due to it being a machine pistol, and it can only fire the gun normally via hip fire. On top of that, it has a long reload time. You can work around it by pre-firing, then aiming on sights, but for the most part, it's not worth your time. The Kuva Hek, while it seems like a side grade on paper, in practice the damage buff compared to the Vacor Hek is very noticeable. However, the gun has its fair share of problems, like it not being able to use Shattered Justice for no reason, and it also has a similar reload to the Vacor Hek, despite it not having 8 shots, so you're going to be reloading a lot. The gimmick makes this weapon shoot all 4 rounds at the same time, which is nice if you really want something dead, but overall I miss the 8 shots that the Vacor version had too much, and I didn't have fun using this weapon either. The Ambassador is only obtainable via the new Railjack Survival, aka Necromech Survival, but what you get for your time spent is pretty underwhelming. It's basically a worse Fallman that has a sniper secondary mode instead of a shotgun one. While the sniper has very high base damage, crit stats are slightly lower than the primary fire, so the damage isn't consistent, but if it was, it would probably do more damage than the Lanka. The Tenet melee weapons have the roughest grind out of all the weapons in this update, and to get them, instead of killing Parvos Liches, you need to grind hollow keys from Void Storms, which have a 37% chance of dropping. And honestly, I think they should be guaranteed because the bonus for the weapons are completely random depending on Ergo Glass's rotation. And if that wasn't bad enough, all the Tenet melee weapons suck. Do not buy any of these weapons. Out of all the Tenet melee weapons, the Livia is the least bad, but that's not saying much. It's strictly a better Tatsu. It does okay damage and shares a gimmick with the Grigori, that being the combo timer is paused when holstered and doesn't overproc radiation like the Tatsu even with a radiation bonus. The Tenet Grigori is for the most part a normal scythe with a terrible gimmick where it throws out a disc on heavy slide attack or every consecutive heavy attack. While the disc does a lot of damage at around like 44k base damage, it doesn't have guaranteed slash like the normal heavy attack does, so it doesn't do much against armor, and the disc will just block your normal slash procs, making you wait a bit before you can get off that next slash proc from the weapon. Maybe you'll be able to take out an Eidolon with the disc, but other than that, there isn't much use for this thing. The Tenet Agendus is a hammer and shield that does mostly impact and electric damage, and on heavy attack it shoots out an Arca Plasmor shot that just got nerfed and now has no headshot multiplier. The main problem with this thing is it's far too easy to ragdoll enemies with this thing, so it's not very practical. The Tenet Exec is an impact heavy blade just like the War, except it has an awful gimmick where the slams and heavy slams trigger a low damage ragdolling wave that limits the weapon's usability. The Kuva Grattler, which is barely an upgrade over the original, while it does more damage than the Morga primary fire, it doesn't have an alt fire, and it still has that awful recharge rate and range limit, so the Morga is still better for necromechs. The main gimmick is that this weapon doesn't have a spool up time compared to the original at the cost of a lower base fire rate. If you don't like the Grattler, the Kuva Grattler won't change your mind about it. The Kompressa is Yareli's signature weapon that's locked behind rank 5 vent kids, and unlike Yareli, this weapon isn't bad. Where it does function similar to the Stug, it actually procs status. It's a viral status shotgun that shoots water bubbles as projectiles, and the projectiles explode doing decent damage. Overall, pretty solid, and I was fully prepared for this weapon to just be a kick in the balls. And last we have the Cadus, which is formerly the Chinese exclusive bow staff upgrade. That's mostly a side grade to the Amphis. Nothing really of note here other than the upgrade adds electric damage innately, but it's an MR4 weapon and I didn't really bother forming it. There are also some minor changes to this update, like the addition of rank 10 command, giving you the ability to buy elite crewmates that come with perks, but they are very expensive. Parvos Liches can also be crewmates, but just like Grineer ones, they are also locked to the defender role, which makes no sense. Innate combined elements function differently now, and I'm not sure if this is a bug or not, but you can get elemental combos like radiation heat, magnetic viral electric, corrosive toxin, and other wacky combos. Parazon finishers now have a threshold, they aren't just random anymore, and impact procs can raise that threshold, making them easier to proc, meaning that you can technically nuke with the Parazon, but I'm not going to use these in regular gameplay. There are new armor sets for each faction like Ostrons or your Syndicates, and Helminth has new powers like Invigorations, which are buffs to random Warframes, but apparently the buffs are weighted, so the more popular a frame is, the less likely you'll see an Invigoration for them. And the new Warframe powers aren't anything special either, or they're just weirdly worded. This one power here that sacrifices your shields for armor, and by sacrifice they mean completely remove. So good luck with that. Sickening Pulse seems like it'd be really good for electric builds. And finally we have Veracious Metastasis that apparently puts Eevee in the grave and Garuda is now the go-to energy battery, but I haven't tested this yet. Anyway guys, that's all for me. I want to thank you guys for watching, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.